Hi, today I'm interviewing Steffen Weinstok. He's Senior Director Sales at Lufthansa Group. He's responsible for Italy and Malta. Well, Steffen Weinstok is a really inspiring leader. He's someone who is really walking the talk. So I'm very happy to be interviewing him. And today he is going to share with us his own experiences dealing with uncertainty and fear as a leader. So this is quite a hot topic nowadays. I hope that you're going to enjoy this interview. So, what would you say about this tendency of leaders wanting to control so much and wanting to adopt this top-down approach?
On the one hand side, I understand the worries, but on the other hand side, and if COVID really has one positive effect on, let's say, on our daily work, it showed that all together we are able to work differently. To give you an example, my team was not in the office now since more than 6 months. If you want to control them, you're not able to control them because they in short time work. They work between 10 and 50% of their regular time, and they are working from everywhere. Some are working from the seaside, some are working from home, but at the end of the day, and I think this is also a process of trust. We were discussing for years working from home, and I know many of my colleagues who told me this will never work if somebody tries to work at home. The last 6 months proved that it's possible.
Right. And how do you find our people dealing with this, with this uncertainty, with this fear of the unknown? Also, Lufthansa has been hit very hard. So I can imagine that many people are are afraid of what is going to happen to their work, to their job. So what have you been observing, and how have you been dealing with these fears and uncertainties in the people that you work with?
So I think my observation, and this was really the most important learning, that you have different characters in your team. You have the one who is already a bit afraid, even in, let's call it, normal times. You have the curious one that always look for something new and try to create something new. And what I observed in the last 6 months, that these characters come even out more strong during a crisis. Those who were afraid already in pre-COVID times are the most having fear now, or having the most fear now today. And those being curious, they even see an opportunity that things might change and participate in working groups to model the new. So from my perspective as a leader, it's even more difficult to bring them together because I see different characters a bit drifting apart. And I fully agree. Fear is a huge topic in these uncertain times where we announce weekly new figures for probable layoffs. And since 6 months, we see that our business doesn't move forward and there's no perspective for the next month. And I think fear is a big topic for everybody on each hierarchy level at the time being.
Yes. Well, I think already recognizing this fear is important, because fear often leads us to make poor decisions. It leads us to make decisions without really being aware of why we're doing things. And so, how have you been dealing with fear over this period of time?
I think the most important, and this was my personal learning, is really to take care that fear does not take control of your life. It's easy said because I see many people suffering that really are driven by fear. But I think, especially in a leadership position, you can only be as optimistic if you don't have it in yourself. And if you do not believe in the future, it's hard really to convince people to continue. Even if your business is dropped by 90%, there's still 10%. And I think the most important thing, what I recognized also in the last month, is really purpose. We were discussing about purpose of jobs even in the pre-COVID time, but especially in these times where people are not able to go to office, work on a very reduced working time. Even in these times, it's important to create purpose that people keep stuck to the company. Otherwise, you will lose them.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what do you think is a way, an effective way to keep people aligned to the purpose or connected to the purpose?
I think what I learned is really these times are very demanding in terms of leadership. And at a certain point, I also discovered that it's very important also as a leader that you take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like the story in the aircraft where you say if you're traveling with children, please take the mask first for your own and then take care of your children. This is something I realized after a couple of months, that these times are very demanding. And I also decided for myself to have some, let's call it breakouts. This is one important learning I did in this time, to take even more care than I did before. And the second thing is, not being driven by fear means you have to create yourself alternatives. Everybody has dreams in his life, and many people in these times think, oh, my dreams will never come true. And I think it's even the time now to work harder to realize the dreams. And you can do it. If you want it, you can do it.
Yes. What you're actually saying, I mean, you're talking about really developing a deeper awareness of who you are and who you want to be. So it sounds like this has got very much to do also with taking responsibility for your own well-being, for your own also for your own career trajectory, so to speak. What do you think is the role of responsibility, of your personal responsibility in all of this?
I said on the one hand side, it's really taking care of yourself, because you are responsible for your team. If you don't take care of yourself, you will not be able to take care of everybody within your team. If you're feeling bad, you cannot expect that your team is doing well when you try to motivate them to give their tasks and their work a purpose. So it's also really, you serve as a role model. And even in these times, you're much more deeper observed by your team than you are in usual times, because everybody's suffering and discussions come a lot on the topic, how can we deal with this situation? So leadership in these times take much more time, and they are much more intense, because emotions are much higher than in, let's call it, usual times. Mm-hmm. And of course, and this is what I tell also everybody, not I am responsible for everything, also people are responsible how they feel, and I can give recommendations. Mm-hmm. I can listen, and sometimes even listening is something, and this is one of the learnings I had during my coaching training. Listening sometimes is much better. Listening for 5 minutes, somebody to open himself, is better than giving advices in a situation where you are completely away from the topic and the perspective of the person. Mm-hmm. So even in these times, I benefit really from this coaching training, because it gives you a bit more sensitivity, mm-hmm. also to read between the lines, and sometimes really let people open themselves and tell their story, mm-hmm. because by telling their story, sometimes they realize what they already could do. Right.
And again, we're back to what you were saying at the beginning about finding the solutions within yourself. People can already have the solutions within them.
Yeah, you have to encourage them. And you know my story, in these crazy times, sometimes you even have to take kind of crazy decisions. We had always the dream to buy a house on the seaside. And we really had a discussion in these times. Is it possible? Is it the right moment? And we decided together, yeah, let's do it, because if we don't do it now, we will never do it. And we bought the house, and I took a bank loan the day before the company was temporarily saved. When we signed the buying contract, I had no clue if I would have a job a couple of days after. But this is also, if you don't believe in the future and act accordingly, I think people realize that you are not authentic.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so true. And this is also something, I think this is also very much connected to the fact of where do you put your attention? What do you focus on? I think we tend to focus so much on the problems, and so we miss the opportunities. So, and in order to grab the opportunities, we need to shift our focus. So we need to be able to let go of the fears, like you did. You know, I can imagine it was not an easy decision for you to buy this house, but you shifted your focus on the opportunities, on what you would get out of this, and also probably simply the fact of looking at the in a more trusting way when it comes to life.
And I think what we mentioned before, in our life, it's also a lot about excuses. I know many people that spend a lot of time finding the best excuses not to do things. And this is also, it's a bit like with, let's say, the trainings and all the education I did. Beside, I was not requested by the company. I was curious, I wanted to do it. And also I had a couple of years always the excuse, oh, I cannot afford from a time perspective. But I think if you really want something, you find the time and the way. And there are many examples of busy people that continue with learning and really find the time to take care of topics they are interested in. Because if you're only driven all your life, it's the same with fear than with workload. Mm-hmm. You're a slave of anybody else. And I think this makes also the difference, deciding on things and executing them.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Without waiting that something else changes or somebody else gives you the opportunities to do things or permission to do things or the time to do things. So, well, you know, considering what you've been telling me, it sounds to me like these times are actually very precious times. I mean, they're so challenging, but at the same time, I find that there is something new that is emerging here, a new kind of leadership for the ones who are capable of recognizing it, I would say. But it's a leadership that is more rounded. You know, it's not a kind of leadership that is focused on achieving business goals, for example. But it's also something. It's a type of leadership that is encompassing people, the human dimension, so much more. I find that nowadays it is even more important for leaders to be coaches, to be somehow psychologists to a certain extent, but really being able to still keep people on board, you know, not just because you need to use them in order to make the profits that your company needs, but to keep them on board also emotionally, you know, to see them as important, precious, valuable, so that everyone actually can grow, so that everyone together can also find the solutions in order to overcome the crisis. Of course, I can imagine it's easier for a small company, for a startup. It might be much more difficult for such a group like Lufthansa. But I think that the human element in leadership is still there. It is significant in any kind of organization.
I fully agree. And in these times, I think really listening, being empathic with the people is much more important than ever before. Because if you don't create really this purpose, that the people still have the feeling that they are part of something, you lose big parts of your employees, and everybody's in a different situation. Some really deal better with such a situation of uncertainty. Others really are driven by fear. And bringing all this to the point that we still remain a kind of, let's call it really family together. I think this is the biggest challenge, not losing people in these times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is what makes the difference also in leadership. Try to take care of everybody, even if on distance, only on remote. You know that it's always impossible, but really giving them the feeling there is somebody listening, and there's also still a purpose. And this is, I just told you, we had a lunch with the team leads a couple of days ago, and I think it's important also doing these small things beside, because video calls we had all very much in the last month, and really also coming together physically. I think it really helps, and therefore you have to create small moments, which in normal times you don't need, but for the time being, we are not in normal times, so you also have to use a certain creativity.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember when you told me about the lunch with your team, you mentioned that you had set a rule that the lunch would not be about business or work in any way.
Yeah, this is something you can do every day by meals or by video chats. I think the most important is really also, let's call it a human side, which has been lost in the last month. And there are different ways to deal with it. Some people need it more, some need it less, but at the end of the day, we are not made to only communicate via Zoom or Teams or Skype. We are human beings. And also from my personal background, I'm convinced that once the borders will open again, and it will be possible, also people will travel again, because these 6 months were really, from that perspective, there's a lack of something.
Yeah, yeah.
Even we could meet physically again soon, and replace the video chat really by a coffee together.
Yes, right, absolutely. Well, I think we need to close here, but I'm still curious about let's say your final tip, your final suggestion for everyone who is struggling in organizations, who could be employees, it could be managers at any levels, it could even be a CEO. What would be your tip, your number one tip?
I think you managed it a bit. You have to be aware that you are responsible of yourself. On the one hand side, in taking care of yourself. On the other hand side, also in developing yourself. If you sit and wait that somebody picks the topic up with you, I think in these times you won't make it to be as clear as possible. I think personal responsibility in both directions is much more important than ever, and this can open doors that you would have thought would never open. And if you have a dream, follow it. There are no times where things are not possible. You simply have to do it. And maybe the last phrase, think about which excuses you used in the past and get rid of your excuses and get things done. And be optimistic and use the energy really to attack these topics.
Great, thank you so much. Also, you know, what you're saying is actually totally in line with the concept of leadership activation, you know, that is so dear to me.
Okay.
So it's really about really about activating the true leader within yourself, and this is absolutely the right time to do this.
As you confirmed it, leaders should be active, not passive.
Yes, exactly.
That makes the difference.
Yes. But still, it's not something to, that everyone sees that way. There are a lot of leaders who are passive, and this is the time to think and act like a true leader, and be ready to have the courage to go beyond excuses, for example, to go beyond assumptions, and really take the first step and keep going actively.
And do things that make you happy.
Yes.
That's also part of the story.
Absolutely, because I mean, in the end, that is the real driver. That is what really fuels you, what gives you the energy and keeps you going, even when things are tough. But it's something that gives you a sense of purpose, I would say, even. Yeah.
Yeah, fully agree.
Well, Steffen, it's always such a pleasure to speak with you, to listen to you, and I would love to hear more. For the sake of this interview series, we need to cut here. But I really hope that I will have the opportunity in the future to speak with you again in an interview, because I believe that what you have been sharing and what I'm sure you would be sharing also in the future, it's so valuable. I think so many leaders need to hear this, need to hear examples, concrete examples, from real leaders, not just theory books. So thank you so much.
I fully agree.
Yes.
And as always, it's been a pleasure. It has been a pleasure talking to you. And as I told you, we will find the opportunity.
Yes.
Don't find excuses why it shouldn't work. Let's plan it when and how we do it.
Exactly, with a real coffee, not a virtual one.
With a real coffee, I fully agree.
Okay, thank you so much, Steffen. And
Thank
all the best.
you, Myriam, and all the best for you too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.